Hi, I'm Paula K. Parker. Welcome to my living room. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm going to be having some tea and a little bit of reading from my book, Sisters of Lazarus, Beauty Unveiled. Sisters of Lazarus, Beauty Unveiled, Chapter 1, Vain and Prideful. The year 9 Nisan, 3792. 1 week before Passover, in Bethany. Slowly, cautiously, a young woman's head and shoulders appeared around the open door, her face veiled except for the eyes that darted about, searching for signs of life. Outside the door, the sun, molten at midday, baked the packed dirt road. The wind, coming from the south, gave little relief. Beads of sweat shimmered across the delicate brow. Martha. The whispered breath barely moved the fabric covering the lips. She stepped through the doorway and looked left and then right. Martha. No response, no movement, no sound. Filling her lungs with a quiet sigh, the young girl straightened and lifted a hand to release the veil covering her nose and mouth. She folded the sheer material to silence the tiny bells sewn along its length. Ears straining to hear footsteps, she bent over to ease the sandals off her feet and place them in the basket on her arm. She carefully slid off the dozen gold bracelets from her arms. Why did I have to wear so many today? And laid them on top of the veil. Confident that nothing would betray her presence, she stepped quietly into the house and eased the door shut behind her. The thick cut stone of the house's outer walls kept out the heat of the Judean sun. The front room reflected the wealth of the owners. Used to entertaining their frequent guests, it stretched the full width of the house. The walls were covered in smooth clay with bright frescoes of pomegranates and flowers. Niches in the wall held expensive glassware and painted pottery. A large wooden lattice-work screen stood near the arch to the right hallway. The floor was tiled with an elaborate mosaic of alternating circles of purple, red, and blue instead of packed dirt like those in poorer homes, and the ceiling was covered with stucco in raised, swirled patterns. Lampstands set around the room gave off the scent of perfumed oil. Along one wall, several low limestone tables held terrace digillata trays. The glossy red pottery was a recent acquisition from Rome. Large stone jars beneath the tables held water and wine. Thick cushions were placed around a low table in the center of the room, where people would recline during a meal. The girl turned to the hallway on the left, which led towards the bedchambers. If I hurry, I can hide thee. Mary! It's about time you got back. Startled, Mary dropped the basket she was carrying. It thumped sideways onto the central table, spilling her things as well as several cloth bags and a small crock with a tightly fitted lid. The crock spun lopsidedly towards the edge. Mary lunged to grab it before it fell off. She breathed a sigh of relief and placed the container in the center of the table. You scared me, Martha. She turned to face her sister. If that crock of honey had broken, it would have been your fault. Martha stood in the arch of the hallway on the other side of the room, arms crossed, holding a cloth in one hand and a wooden spoon in the other. It was obvious she had been cooking. Wisps of black hair lay damply across a brow smudged with soot, and dark spots splattered her plain woolen tunic. You've been gone all morning, Martha frowned and wiped her face with a cloth, smearing the soot across her forehead. I was beginning to think you had to go all the way to Greece to harvest the saffron yourself, rather than buy it in the local marketplace. Color washed Mary's soft cheeks. She shrugged as she bent to pick up the scattered items. Abram's booth was busy today. A troop of Roman soldiers stopped to buy some spices from him. He told us Pontius Pilate had requested extra soldiers to help control the crowds that would gather in Jerusalem for Passover. Romans, Martha gasped. Rushing to the other side of the room, she grabbed her sister's arm. Did they speak to you? Did they bother you? Did they... Calm down, Martha. Mary removed Martha's hand from the sleeve of her tunic. I stayed away from Abram's booth until the Romans were gone. But a slow smile spread across her face, although I was close enough to see that several of the soldiers were very handsome. Mary! What? Mary was a picture of innocence. I didn't intend to marry a Roman, but I don't mind looking at them. Mary, Mary, Mary. Martha shook her head. You always push the boundaries. She took a deep breath. Well, I hope you were able to get everything I need. She dropped the cloth on the table and bent over to reach for one of the small bags on the floor. Don't! Mary snatched the bag before Martha's fingers touched it. Her sister straightened up, eyebrows raised. Why not? Mary squirmed under Martha's penetrating gaze. There's no need. I'll pick them up. Mary scrambled to get the other bags. After all, I'm the one who dropped them. But you wouldn't have dropped them if I hadn't startled you. Martha picked up a bag, opened it, and poured out several tiny light brown balls into her hand. Coriander, she said, dropping the seeds back into the bag and opening another. Reaching in, she pulled out a brown oval pod. Cumin. Good, I need this to season the meat. She picked up a third. A spicy sweet scent permeated the air as she pulled out a short, dried stick. Cinnamon. She picked up the last bag. This must be the saffron. She bounced the bag in her palm. Rather heavy for such a light spice. She opened it, peeked inside, and then looked at Mary. Her gaze cold. Holding her empty hand in front of her, palm upraised, Martha turned the bag upside down. A small mirror slid into her hand. The polished bronze surface reflected Martha's frown. I don't remember my recipe calling for this ingredient. Martha's voice dripped with sarcasm. Mary grabbed the mirror from her sister's hand. Very funny.